Okay lang.
Go for it. Yes.
Okay.
All right. As I was
Mm,
saying, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be contributing to the life and the work of the Carlos Bulosan Center for Filipinx Studies, especially in mentoring students, as Robin has been talking about. I hope we have a good, productive time with each other. I'm gonna speak a little bit and then open it up for discussion. How about that? The background you see is not my house. It's like a fantasy house. So I have like three parts of things to do. So in the beginning, I'm gonna give you an overview of what seems to, in my experience, to work. What does a successful article look like? What does an article that's not been accepted look like? What did it do, right? So I'm going to give you an overview of that, of like accepted versus quote unquote rejected essays. And then the second one, I'm going to give you about three strategies, right? And then in the last one, I'm going to give you some sort of like tips, right? So the difference between the practices and the tips is that practices are the ones that are sort of written in like guidebooks, or at least from the experience of people. And the tips that I'm going to give you are like tips from just from me, from my experience, right? Insider tips is what I call it. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Okay. All right. So first, I'm going to give you an overview. So there are three kinds of essays that usually get successfully published. But before that, I want to say something about scholarly publication. Of course, scholarly publication is not the only way to achieve academic success, right? Even though a lot of universities and a lot of different organizations based their evaluation of academics, people like us, and other kinds of people on the basis of what they produce, right? The knowledge that they produce. But we all know that scholarly writing is not the only way. It's not the only benchmark for academic success. So this is just one. A great deal of the scholarly journals that I'm going to talk about will be about publishing in like top tier, university presses, right? Or university journals, or journals that are affiliated with large professional organizations. And again, that sounds very elitist, right? But the reality is that a lot of these, a lot of like college councils and tenure committees look at these places as the places where high value scholars should be publishing, right? And I hate that hierarchy. And at some point, we want to dismantle that, right? But at this point, since most of the people who do reviews and most people who are in power in academic institutions are members of dominant culture, and that's their rules, right? So for now, we're just going to follow certain parts of those rules without losing our dignity and our integrity. And then when we get there, we can sort of do our interventions, right? In terms of dismantling or at least poking at that hierarchy, right? Okay. So there are three kinds of essays that usually get published successfully, right? So the first one is an essay that is what we call clean, right? A clean essay means that the essay was submitted in a very organized way, free of errors, right? Usually when you submit an essay to a journal, it goes through what we call a first review, which is also called a table review, which means that either the editor or the editorial assistant takes a look at the submission and checks if it followed the submission policies. It's like, did you follow the margins? Did you follow the word count? Did you follow, processes of anonymizing yourself? If you did not do this, unfortunately, your essay gets thrown out. It gets rejected immediately. And it's unfortunate because it got rejected not on the basis of its content, but on some technical basis, right? It's like a technical knockout, right? It's like you did not even play the game, right? You didn't even start playing the game and you got rejected already. So you should avoid this. So that's one. Obviously, an essay that's not accepted, one version of an unaccepted essay would be an essay that was carelessly written. And usually editors get very annoyed at this because they feel insulted, right? It's like you submitted something that was kind of dirty, right? Or unprepared or disorganized or not ready to be shown. Grammatical errors are very much, right on the very first sentence, right? That's enough reason for an editor to throw your submission away. So the first one, again, is a clean, organized essay. The second one is an essay that has an argument. This is very important because editors always check that. What is this person arguing? An argument, as you know, is a statement or a set of statements that expresses a particular intellectual opinion, right? It could be a cause and effect relationship. It could be some kind of finding that you present. An argument is not a description. If you're saying that I'm going to analyze this, this novel, that's not an argument, right? But if you say this novel is about a particular rendition of a humanistic form, whatever, right? So an argument expresses a certain kind of statement of a finding that is, in a way, provable through evidence, right? This is what I'm arguing. I'm going to talk about 3 parts of the novel to substantiate that argument, and I'm going to end it, right, at some point. So an argument needs to be something that's not descriptive, and the essay should express a form of engagement with the field, right? When you present a submission to a journal, you're actually trying to have a conversation with the people who are in that field, right? So when you're trying to have a conversation, just like in regular social gatherings, right, you present a particular kind of context, right? And so you have to locate your work within the body of literature of that field. So make sure you do that when you submit, because that's the kind of essay that editors like. It's like, oh, this person is actually engaging in critical Filipino-American studies, right? Because they're locating their work within debates about the value of Carlos Bulosan's work. So that's a good one. Or your essay can present a new way of looking at things, right? There's so many essays written about Maxine Hong Kingston. What else is there to say, right? So if your essay presents something, oh, you know what? A lot of people have already talked about Maxine Hong Kingston this way. I'm going to show a different angle, or I'm going to present new data or a new kind of reading using a particular methodology that's not been done before, right? And so that's something new, right? So it triggers some kind of provocation on the editor. And that's very appealing to many editors because you're presenting kind of like a fresh voice, right? In what could be considered a trite subject, right? The opposite of that is, of course, an essay that's too descriptive, too narrow. It doesn't engage, with the literature of the field. It's unremarkable, right? It's like you're summarizing the novel. That's not a journal essay, right? Or your scope, it's like editors are usually we avoid accepting essays that talk about only one scholar, right? So like a 25-page essay on Jose Rizal's poem in 1885 that appeared in some obscure place. It's just and it's like this one reading, right? And so you want to expand that a little bit or deepen it a little bit. You cannot just or else it comes out as a book review, or it's like, a literary analysis of just one piece, right? So usually that's rejected. And the third and the last one, an essay that is successful is one in which the author was willing to improve and revise. Almost everybody submits an essay or publishes an essay that's been revised several times. Very, very rarely I haven't seen any essay that was submitted and then immediately published. Even if you're the best writer, right? Usually there's some, sort of tinkering that happens between submission and publication, obviously, right? So an author who is willing to do improvements and revisions are the ones who get to be successful, especially if they engage with the editor, right? And of course, the other side of that, an essay that doesn't get published usually had very negative reviews, and the author was unwilling to revise, sufficiently, right? One thing that we hear a lot in terms of reviews especially nasty reviews, which I kind of edit myself also as an editor, is when reviewers accuse or make personal below the belt judgments of a submission, right? Something like, and you've heard this before, right? Oh, it reads like a graduate student paper, right? Which is quite insulting and quite, what is a graduate student paper, right? That the submission was just too narrow, or maybe didactic sounding, or maybe too plain or too unremarkable. And that's what they say, right? So it's a hurtful thing to say, but there are ways to sort of deal with that productively and positively, right? And not to excuse that, by the way. All right, so I'm gonna give you 3 good practices in journal essay submissions, in successful journal essay submissions. So number 1, a good practice is to always align your work with the journal, right? This is kind of obvious, but if you, it's like, in the Journal of Asian American Studies myself, we've received essays that are about Africa, right? Why would you submit there? I mean, that's not the scope of the journal, right? Or African Americans, unless there's a relationship that you're trying to establish between Asian Americans and African Americans, don't submit it there, right? Editors always look for a fit, right? It's like hiring a professor. You want this person to feel good within the company of scholars in your department. That's why you don't want to hire someone who will feel out of place, right? Same with the journal. So if I were you, I will scan the horizon of available journals that will fit the kind of publication or essay that you're trying to submit, right? If I were you, I'll read those journals very thoroughly, especially the recent issues, and fantasize about your work fitting in that journal or not fitting in that journal, right? You don't want your essay to fit in a journal that looks weird or awkward, right? So make sure that you identify the place thoroughly, right? Read about the journal thoroughly before you submit to it, or else you're gonna be, you don't know what's gonna happen to your piece. It might get rejected all of a sudden, right? That's number 1. So know the field, definitely, right? And know the field of journals where you want to submit. You can also ask around, right? Or if you have like a favorite author or favorite scholar, where do they publish? You can try them too, because that's where you want to be, right? Number 2, follow the submissions policies to the letter. That's why they're there. Yeah, to don't mess around with submissions policies, because again, that's the first gatekeeper, right? And if you don't follow them, your submission gets thrown out, because it's very annoying to editors when they see these things, right? Everything, especially the citation style, the policy on word counts, definitely the kinds of formatting and stuff that you need to do in your submission. And then the third one, and the last one, is to keep your eye on deadlines. Editors are very finicky about these things in terms of being prompt, right? So make sure, and it's a long, drawn out process. So usually journals will take from 6 months to a year, right? From submission to publication. And some journals take more than 1 year, right? I know American Quarterly takes like 2 years, right? And so be patient, follow up if you need to, and then also keep track of your own deadlines, right? Okay, the last one I'm going to talk about would be insider tips. Okay, so these are the things that not a lot of people know that I want to share with you. And I have 5. So 1, the first tip that I want to share with you is to try to engage with the editor or the assistant editor. It's okay to communicate with them. Not all editors are cranky and too busy to communicate with you. And it's a good sign that if they are willing to communicate with you, it means that they care about the quality of their journal. Not a lot of authors have communicated with me for some reason, right? And it's good and it's bad, right? But if you're a newcomer to the field, it's always helpful and produces great results if you're able to communicate with the editor, because that's where particular items get talked about, right? In email exchanges, for example. And sometimes I even do phone calls and Zooms. Yeah. So that's number one. Try to engage with the editor, especially if you're unfamiliar with the process or unfamiliar with the journal that much, right? And then second one, know and respect the publication process. Don't be too sensitive when it comes to reviewing. Everyone gets reviewed. I know I feel bad too when my work gets reviewed, but I allow myself maybe like a day or two just to feel bad, and then I just get back on the saddle and just get on with the work as much as I can, because I want to be published, right? So know and respect the publication process, how things get evaluated, and the decisions made by editors. If you end up having your essay rejected, you can go to the next journal. It's fine, and maybe it will have a different reading, right? And maybe it will find a better place, right? Okay, the third one, I would like to encourage you to join writing communities. Academic writing is a very lonely experience when you do it by yourself. And we do it by ourselves most of the time, right? It's very lonely sometimes. And so you need like people around you, right? Even if you don't want to share your work, or you don't have to have rules when it comes to writing communities, but I found them to be very, not so much helpful, but sort of like it relieves you of so much anxiety when you're just writing in the company of other people who understand your field or your career or whatever it is that you're going through, right? In several writing groups that I'm a part of, we don't have rules in terms of, oh, you have to share, or you have to read it, or you have to show people what you wrote that day, whatever, blah, blah, blah. We don't. We just say, hey, if you want to read my work, yeah, sure, thank you, But if you want to be private about your work, at least in the writing communities I'm a part of, you don't have to share if you're worried about that. But writing communities can also read each other's works, right? And so to me, I find that to be extremely gratifying. And of course, I also write by myself most of the time, right? But at least every now and then, be a part of a writing community. The fourth tip I have is very nerdy sounding, but this is what I do. Try to read and write all the time. I mean, I just read whatever I can get my hands on. Anything that I find interesting, even if it's beyond my field, I just read them. Every time I find an essay or a line of that somebody else wrote, I copy it, I put it in my journal, or I snip it and then I put it in my bulletin board, because they're it's like, oh my gosh, that sentence is so beautifully written. It's like, and so I clip it, and these are like models for me on writing well. Modesty aside, if personally I found, like I just wrote what I think to be a fantastic, terrific sentence, I put it on my board, and no one else but me understands why it's there, right? It's to motivate me. Like, hey, it's like patting yourself on the back for like writing a great sentence or a great paragraph, right? Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of that paragraph, right? So give yourself, a lot of like breaks and self-care, and pat yourselves on your back every now and then, because you need that, right? Graduate school can be grueling, right? Academic life can be so like pounding on your self-esteem every day. So you need the power of self-care to just rescue you from these things, right? And so I do that. And then lastly, try to take pleasure in what you do. Make it fun. It's like you're writing on something that you're interested in, and you discovered something, you found an angle. Be happy about it, because if you're an academic, or you're going to be an academic at some point, that's going to be your life. And so might as well enjoy it, right? Life is short, and so might as well enjoy the writing process, because it can be grueling at times. There could be a lot of foot dragging every now and then. And so as much as possible, pick a subject that you like to write about and do research on, because that will sustain you, for the rest of your career. Don't pick a subject that you're forced to pick, because you're going to have really painful writing moments at 2 in the morning, right? If you're writing at 2 in the morning and you like what you're writing, at least it's fun for you, right? And at least it's bearable. But if it's something that you're not even interested in, that people are forcing you to write on, or you're forcing yourself to write on, it's not going to work. It might work, but you're going to get sick at some point, right? Sick of yourself, sick of your career, right? And so try not to do that. Try to avoid, things that take the fun out of the work. And I don't mean fun as in like, shallow ways of like lounging about, right? I mean fun in terms of like you're excited about your work. And it will show in your writing, and it will show in your labor, right? Okay, that's all I have, because I want to speak with everybody about what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I've been in the very last stages of publishing my article or editing my article and submitting it to
Nice.
publication. I've been in this stage for almost a year. Um, I think for me, like at the very last like 10, 15 edits, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to publish because I'm so scared of like academia and being canceled. I just have this fear of like being like, oh my God, you're so, insulting to this part of the community, or you're forgetting this part, or there's so much like cancellation all the time. And I think like my fear is like offending every single part of the community, or
Oh,
like, it's just a scary thing to be
because
thinking.
of what you wrote,
Yeah,
critical of certain things.
yes, scared. Yeah, I'm very scared.
Well, not to sound silly, but to be scared is part of the game. Being scared is part of the game. What you might want to do is show your work to other folks without giving them a whole lot of context. Just let them read the draft and see what their reaction is. Number two, whenever there's something critical in my work that I say, and I'm an ethnographer, and maybe you are, because you did interviews, right? And so I rely on evidence. I rely on data. This is what the subject said, you know, and this is my analysis and my interpretation, right? And whether you agree with them or not, whether you agree with your subjects or not, this is what they're bringing up, and this is what I'm reporting. So if you take that stance, it's not you doing the value judgments, it's your subjects revealing these value judgments or critiques, right? And you're reporting them. You might preface those subjects commentaries with, readers might think this is offensive, but I mean, just couch them in terms of like, this is a study I did. I cannot omit them or hide them, right? And these are not my own judgments. I mean, it's my analysis, but it's not. And I know you're the writer and you selected which quotes to put out, right? But you can write about them in ways that are critical but not offensive. Whenever I'm writing something critical, I usually provide alternative points. Some people may react this way, others may do this. Clearly the subjects identify these things, and based on based on the research done in the community, it might be because of these kinds of reasons, right? But yeah, have other people read it too, you know, because yeah, I've seen drafts that are quite critical and quite offensive, like name calling. And I'm sure you don't do that. Whenever I see those things, you cannot be doing this. You cannot just insult another scholar by calling them names and telling them that you're better, right? That's not the way to do scholarship anyway, right? And so I'm sure you don't sound that way. And so, yeah, I mean, if you present them as data that you got from the field, I think you should be fine, right? And our community needs the critique. Of course, you want to share your critique in ways that are not as, not insulting or not incredible, You're also giving voice to people who feel that they can't say that out loud. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I agree.
Hi, Rick. Thank you so much for doing this workshop.
Thank you.
I guess I wanted to, I'll talk a little bit about what happened with me. So I submitted my article to like a really like the #1 sociology journal in American Journal of Sociology. It took like 7 months to get feedback. It was great feedback, but it took 7 months. Submitted it again to Social Forces, which is like, still top, but it's not like the top.
Yeah.
Got like feedback within 3 months. So I'm doing this again. And the feedback I keep getting, I guess, so first of all, like, especially as a junior scholar, how do you navigate the need to publish in a top journal, but also like, we also need to, graduate and publish. So that's one question. But the other is, kind of, I keep getting this roadblock of like, why study Filipinos, especially in my field. There's not a lot of research it's not like psychology, like there's not that many sociologists in studying Filipinos. So, those are my 2 questions.
First of all, yeah, I mean, it's great to aim high, right? But you know that there are risks, right? You're aiming at spots that are very crowded and filled with people who are more senior than you, right? So that's kind of tough. I'm not saying you should shy away from that. You should still try. Top journals usually take years, right? Even senior scholars who publish there take years to get published, right? And so if you're relying on a publication as a part of your looking for a job process, it's not gonna happen during the same year, right? The advantage with so-called less elite journals, but still acceptable journals, is that obviously the timeline is shorter, right? And then the room is not as crowded in terms of like senior scholars dominating the field or controlling the field, right? And take a look also at the journals that you're thinking of publishing at in terms of whether your piece could fit there, right? I mean, do they publish pieces written by graduate students, right? Take a look at, the contributors' bios. Do they publish on like minority populations, right? So take a look at the recent last 2 years of things that they have put out. And so simultaneous submissions usually are not encouraged by editors, because most editors are kind of selfish, right? They don't want to be insulted when it comes to things like this. And if you are, don't tell them, right? If I were you, I'll fantasize about which journal I want to get published in and take a look at whether it's feasible for you. Yeah, go ahead, Robin. Yeah, please.
Yeah, if I may add, I just wanted to also chime in. Thank you, Rick, for all that you've done. But also, I think it's really important to think about, I know that these rankings obviously matter to some extent, but also, it is important to just to do it, meaning and to have the practice of it, and sometimes practicing and getting accustomed to kind of the time frame, just even just all of the mechanics of submission and the review process, getting accustomed to that and starting off in friendlier journals is good practice.
Yeah.
And it's confidence boosting, because this is incredibly challenging. I mean, you'll get those reviews, trust me, they will hurt. No matter, they always hurt. And you will sit on them, and there will be the whole time that it will take for you to simply read, process, heal from the damage, that it does, because sometimes these reviewers are relentless and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
And, so if you haven't had enough experience publishing, just publish. Forget about the rankings. You'll get there, and maybe they're not even relevant, and once you get you boost your confidence, you'll get to these other ones. So that's sort of like something I would offer.
Yeah, sometimes it's even like a badge of honor to be rejected by a snobby journal. It's like, hey, they rejected me, thank you.
Yeah, because I reject you. Just kidding. Sorry. But
yeah, locating friendlier journals is always a good strategy, because take a look at what they published recently, right, and see the quality, the kind of length, or the kinds of topics that they consider seriously, the kinds of methodologies that they are favorable to, right?
The comment I keep getting is, why do we care about Filipinos? Like, there's just not Asian American focus in sociology, which is, as Robin knows, like, that's why it's a lot easier to go in different fields. I just keep getting that comment. They're like, why? Even though I put that, Filipinos are a top, Asian American group, blah, 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 like, all the things that we already know, but they're always like, why? So I'm like, I think I know what I'm going to do. It's just like frustrating.
It
is. And it's not going to stop soon.
And it won't stop. And, and the reality is we've all been doing this for decades, and they still tell us these things. Yeah. And so keep publishing. So then if they don't want to, find a place that will. Collectively and individually, we'll continue to carve our way through. But, it's nothing's changed, has it? But yeah.
We call this the rehearsal part. It's like the review of lit that you always have to do to contextualize your work within a field that doesn't understand, or doesn't know, is not even aware, right, of Filipino American studies. And so, yeah, there's a whole lot of, sort of like, and it's frustrating because a whole lot of space in your short piece can be occupied by that, contextualization that in our communities is unnecessary, because everybody knows about the 350 years of Spanish colony. Everybody knows that, right? And so if a journal is not, if an editor is not happy with that, you can go to the next one. Unless you want to insist and persist, which is up to you. There are other journals. I know, hint, Alon, we don't ask why Filipinos, right? Because the journal is devoted to our people. So, yeah. So I hope that answers you. Yeah. Editors have term limits. Yes, absolutely. When do you know you have a journal article project versus a book project? How do books come out of journals? How do journal articles arise from books? When do you know you have a journal article? Well, a journal article, obviously, in terms of scope and maybe even number of subjects, journal articles are shorter, right? Book length, it's several chapters in one piece. And so that cannot belong to a journal article. Usually a reviewer will say, this is better as a book project, not as a journal article. Journal article is much more focused and sort of like a complete story by itself, right? You don't have to write it in several chapters. You write it in subheadings. How do books come out of journals? Some people have an accumulation of journal pieces that they turn into books, right? That's been done many, many times. How do journal articles arise from books? Journal articles, as a book series editor, we kind of discourage book chapters, like more than one book chapter to come out of a journal, because that's like unfair to the press, unfair to the readers, right? The press wants to get revenue from your projects. So if your book project has 5 chapters that are already published elsewhere in 5 different journals, why would the readers buy the book, right? I understand that, it's still a business, right? And so try not to put out several book chapters in several journals. At the most, maybe just 1, or even, like 2, but no more than that for sure. Robin, yeah? It's like this is a practice that's discouraged by a lot of editors.
Hello. So I am very new to the publishing process, and so I'm a 3rd-year PhD student, and over the past year basically hustled a lot to get 3 articles that ended up being published, like one right after another.
Oh wow, congratulations. Wow.
But it was very intense and difficult. to maintain that level of productivity, right? And going forward, I also have to like propose a dissertation topic and actually work on the dissertation, right? And things like that. And so while I'm very glad that now I'm familiar with the process, I know what to do with responding to reviewers and how long it takes to sit with comments that I disagree with. But like, and again, because the publishing process takes so long, how do you recommend managing multiple projects? Because I think that's one of the things, like for this year, I'm trying to set boundaries, but I want to continue collaborations. But I also don't want to like burn myself out.
Yeah, try not to burn yourself out because
well, I'm a PhD student and I have two
and you have 3 publications already. Wow.
One of the, well, so my advisor was saying, oh, it would be best to have like 6 by the time you graduate.
What?
Yeah, because so I'm in public health. Given these kind of unrealistic goals, but still receive pressure to reach them, right? How do you navigate that?
My first priority would be to not burn out because you're just starting, right? You're a graduate student now, you're embarking on a career and you don't want to get like jaded and tired and just, you know, like completely exhausted, and you're just starting your career, right? And so if I were you, I'll think back and I'll sit back and just ruminate on setting priorities in terms of balancing career and personal and social life, because it's just unless you thrive, and even if you thrive in that kind of like producing situation, you know, you're very prolific, right? If you thrive in that, then fine, but make sure you take care of yourself and your family and your, you know, and your affairs, because it's just, it sounds so grueling. I mean, maybe it's because I'm not that familiar with public health. I'm a regular academic, and writing journal essays takes time, as in writing books, right? And so, and there's teaching, and then there's service, and then there's mentoring, and all these kinds of things, right? And so that's just one facet of our lives, of our academic careers, right? And so you're the one who can tell yourself, I think, and maybe with consulting with your mentors and stuff like that, to be able to balance all of these things, right? Yeah, but expecting like 6 before you graduate, well, I guess that's the nature of your field, right? That sounds very grueling to me. I had like 1 publication, but this was many years ago, but yeah, when I graduated, but that's, you know.
And that's the thing too, is like I hear different things from different people. And so if my main like mentor is saying like, oh, I recommend that you get 6. And even though I got the 3, he's still like, oh, that other one, that's,
you know, sometimes our mentors may not see the other facets of our lives.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we're not just academics. We're not just journal writers, you know. We have families. We have things to work on. We have, yeah, our personal lives, right? And so, and then you'll be expected to teach, right? And so you need to prepare for that. You need, you know, you want to work with your communities, right? And so there are many facets to your life that needs to be taken care of and be mindful about, right? And so to put all of your eggs in this basket of publications, I think it's just, I don't know, that's just my feeling about it. It just sounds so, you know, like exhausting and grueling. Yeah. I hope you're able to deal with that in productive and positive ways.
I guess just to add to that, even though it's hard because we understand there's a power dynamic, and of course there are those mentors who will insist that you comply, but they're more than, I think, in the main, mentors who, you know, will offer recommendations, but, you know, that's it. You also have, you know, your own agency to make decisions about how you want to proceed with your career. And it's the same even with reviews. I can't recall, Rick, if you mentioned that, but you know, you can also reject some of the reviewers.
Oh yeah.
You know, comments. You don't have to address all of them. I don't know if you had
Yeah.
said that, Rick, already, but
You can converse with an editor about your review. There's no rule against interacting with the journal's editor. And if the editor doesn't interact with you, there's the assistant editor, right? And so, yeah, you can negotiate, you can discuss certain points that you disagree with, and you don't need to in fact, as an editor myself, I usually discourage following everything that the reviewer sort of, I mean, these are suggestions, right? And so you don't need to follow them. Very rare will I encounter a reviewer who says, if these things are not followed, I'm going to reject this entirely, right? I mean, it's not up to them anyway. They're just called upon to review.
Hi, thank you all for hosting this space. What are the first steps to take from transitioning from like a qualifying paper or like a really large project for like, you know, a seminar, for example, into, you know, an article? Like, what are the first steps to expanding or kind of revising one's scope for that?
The first step for me is to identify what you want to write about in a kind of specific and focused way. If you type it up, it's about 26 to 30 pages double-spaced, and that's about 50,000, I think, 50,000 words. And so is it 50 or 5,000? I'm not sure, but yeah. So it's something like 25 to 30 pages. So what can fit in that kind of scenario, right? So pick something. If I were you, I'll pick something specific out of your qualifyings. Imagine a reader who wants to know about a part of your project that you find compelling, right? And so I will do that. Or you can pick several things and then you can do the selection process after that, right? And so pick that and then do a roadmap, which is like an outline, right? And so it's like, I'm going to talk about the big topic. Let's say you're arguing something about something specific about writers who are Filipino writers who are in exile, for example, right? And so you have an argument that says, well, you know, exilic literature exhibits a form of, you know, recognition that is about the humanity of life, whatever it is, right? And then you're going to say, well, I'm going to look at, you know, the writings of, you know, 2 or 3 people, or I'm going to look at 2 novels, or I'm going to look at 3 short stories, right? So that's your roadmap already, right? I'm going to pick from these things and string them together so that it forms an argument that says something about what's not only common about them, but what's provocative and compelling about them that no one has written about. Or maybe someone has written about, but you're extending it. And so that's a very specific argument, which you can contextualize in terms of who has written about these authors, what has been said about it, you know, what has been said about Filipino literature that are exilic. And then this is what I'm going to say, right? You can do that in 25 to 30 pages, double-spaced. You want to do an intro and then 3 parts to talk about the 3 authors or the 3 works, right? And then end it, right? So that's, I think, very much in terms of quantity. It's like 7 pages per subheading. So that's 21 pages. 3 pages for my intro and then 2 pages for my conclusion. That's it, you know? So it's like you, that's what I would do in terms of how I work, because I like structure. I like organization. I like threading. I like being coherent, right? And so my arguments are really very, or at least the journal essays that I write are very structured in a way that I try to handhold the reader into the rest of my piece so that I sustain the interest. And once the reader is done with my piece, they kind of remember what I wrote about, right? So yeah, pick something that you can focus on. And then you can actually contextualize it in your essay. You can say this is part of a larger project that explores, you know, Filipino literature in general, right? But for this one, I'm just picking this side or talking about or writing about this particular aspect of that big field that I'm writing about in a larger book project. You remember that you're navigating a big sort of ocean of data, right? You have a lot that you're working on. You need to find a way to organize the data so that the project becomes more clear, right? And more sort of legible, right? You know what I do? When I start a new book project, in this case, a book, right? I have a big cork board with index cards and divided by columns in terms of chapters. And I write in little index cards what I want to write in each chapter, right? And you can move with them. It's like, oh my gosh, later on, you can tell yourself, this belongs to chapter 3. So you just move the index card, right? You can do a smaller version, a small scale version of that with a journal piece. It's like I'm a very outliney person, right? And so you can outline your work and say, this belongs to subheading number 2, right? Or this belongs to subheading number 3. And then, oh my gosh, subheading number 1 looks so thin. It's like I need to add more, analysis there, right? So it's like, it's like you're forming, it's a very architectural kind of building process. It's like you're forming a house that needs to stand, and it needs to stand with the heftiness of your data, right? And your analysis. So that's what I would do. Well, thank you. Every time I start a new project, it's like, there's so many things happening, right? So you need to organize your thoughts. Conceptual maps, some people do that too, which is like, a whole visual representation of the article that you're doing. Arrows, Venn diagrams, boxes that connect with each other and stuff like that, right? And then extraneous items, you toss them away or you put them on the side of the bulletin board. And then you can revisit that later, right? So don't lose that thought too.
I have an ongoing project that I'm hoping to kind of break into pieces, maybe submit for different audiences. And it involves like a methodological framework that I guess is my argument, is that I'm proposing this framework. I'm curious about how, when you're doing something like that, how you kind of narrow the scope or cut it off at a point. Like, do I include kind of the results of that data collection method in that first paper, or is like the framework itself, argument that I'm putting forward? And I'm guessing kind of like confused about how to like support the framework beyond couching it in different approaches and then showing like, these are my initial results. Like after that, we did a survey, collected other results. But I'm wondering, like, do I cut it off at that first collection of people that we eventually surveyed?
Sounds like a large project, right? And so for a journal essay, you want to get a smaller piece of that large project that you write about in the journal essay, right? But for a large project, that's that's dramatically different, right? So if I were you, I'll organize it into parts. And usually, conventionally, the parts are intro, review of lit, methodology, findings, discussion, and so forth, right? You don't need to follow that if you think it's not going to work in your project. But all projects cannot be narrated as one chapter. Definitely. A large project like that needs to be divvied up, needs to be organized through certain sections, right? If you were the reader, so imagine yourself reading what you're going to put out, right? What would you want to know first? That's the first chapter or the intro, right? And then what will be useful for you to know after you read the intro? Maybe some historical background, maybe some kind of a review of lit of the kinds of methodologies out there that have been used and how your work differs, right? And then number 3, the work, right? So it's like, oh, okay, this is now the application of what I've been trying to argue, right? This is the evidence, and then the data, right? And then after the data, it's like, or within the data chapter, you can present analysis as well, right? In graduate school, we're taught to separate data from analysis, right? You don't need to follow that when you're writing a book. You can join them if you want, right? Or you can divide the data into 3 big groups of findings. If you think that one chapter of data is just too much or too narrow, right? Too little. So you can say, well, there's like chapter 3 ABC, right? Like that. And then at the very end, do you want to do a recap? You can do a recap if you want to. right? So again, it's sort of like, I want to sort of make a disclaimer here. It's not the only format that works, but that's what works for me, right? Especially among social scientists, right? You need to present your work in such a way that readers can follow you, because you're not going to be with them. It's your writing that will guide them, right? And so write in a way that your reader will understand the logic of your work. There's evidence there that you're showing that your work works, right? That your system works. And how do you want to present that, right? Do you want to do images? Where do you want to put them, right? It doesn't work at first try. You will revise this over and over again, especially if you're involved in a large project, right? Because you're going to see the project in many different ways during the process of writing it. And so you're gonna do revisions every now and then, right? So don't think it's gonna work for the first time. Just do a preliminary organizational chart or a conceptual map or a conceptual logic in terms of how ideas will flow in this large project. I do a lot of visuals, and so I put them up on a board, right, on a blank wall, so that I can see the totality of that universe that I'm trying to represent for my readers, right? This is how I want to start, and this is how I want to end. I even get down to even the basics of that, right? I want to do 2 quotes in the beginning of this chapter, and these are the quotes, and then I'm going to write about my argument after that, So it's a very detailed kind of script that I'm trying to follow, which I revise over and over again. Because you have to sleep on the ideas, right? And then wake up the next day and say, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm gonna transpose these things and put this here and there, all these other changes that you need to make. But yeah, I feel like you're talking about an elaborate or kind of like a massive project. So you need to organize that in ways that will help the swimmer navigate the pool, right? And so you want to give instructions and you want to give them signs. Yeah. I would recommend reading stuff that your work speaks to, and see how people in your field have presented their work. Not to say that you have to do a carbon copy of them or do a total rendition of what they're trying to do, but at least you'll see the breadth, the variety of presentation strategies that people in the field that you're interested in are already doing, right? So there's usually a culture of, how scholars do it in their own little fields, right? Or big fields for that matter. So if I were you, I'll read books that touch on your subject matter. I'll read the scholars who have been writing about what you're studying, and see how they write and how they present their work. And then you can say, you know what, I like this person's writing. I want to write that way, like that. And so you can follow the kinds of strategies in writing that they do, how they organize their data, and how they present their data. Have you heard about that, Robin? Publish 6 articles before graduating.
Actually, yeah.
Oh my God.
I think I give that advice. Just kidding. No, but I do recommend people should publish multiple, especially in this job market, I think. And it's not even about, I think, but for me, actually, I think I frame it differently. It's less about getting publications out as much as it is about the practice of it all. I'm really in favor of just getting experience. And so I think framed that way, it's different, because there really is shifting from the kind of writing that you do in graduate school, which is, whether it's seminar papers or, of course, your dissertation.
Yeah.
Article writing is an entirely different sort of beast. I mean, even just the submission process, which, and you should know, every journal has a slightly different one.
Yeah.
Some may be old school where you're submitting it directly to the editor. Some of it, of course, are these platforms, and each journal may have a very different submission platform that you have to just get used to, and that takes time. The learning how to submit, never mind, waiting for the reviews.
Yeah.
And again, I think there's a whole mental health piece to journal publication that we really have to address, which is how there's two issues. One is the way that you process reviews and really factoring the time that it will take for you to read it, absorb it, and respond to it in a healthy manner, because it can be debilitating, some of these reviews. And so especially when you're on the tenure clock, for example, really, really anticipating that this cycle, and again, if you've experienced it already in grad school in some ways where the stakes are maybe different or lower, you already kind of know how it feels for you. Then by the time you get into the tenure track and the clock is ticking, you already know to anticipate, well, this is how it feels for me when, and this is how it looks like, right? So that's why there's that. Then there's the second issue, what you worry about in terms of anticipating cancel culture, and that's a tough one because of course, there's what happens in academia when you're publishing. Your primary audience, frankly, is other academics, right? And we do have our own ways of engaging one another that I suppose for the most part are relatively civil, And then there is the realm of, social media, which engages a broader community who are non-scholars, where there is in fact kind of cancel culture, which is, thank God, I don't know, that's why I'm not on Twitter. I don't want to know what you have to say about me. Y'all can just read what I wrote, because I'm not trying to write for Twitter. I could take probably 10 years of chopping up what I wrote over there to over here. Anyway, there's that. But I think also it's just, that is sort of the nature of the beast, unfortunately, right? Is that you do our work and you can anticipate that there will be maybe pushback. But, we also do the work because it is that you did the work, on some level, whatever people may want to hate about, you did the research.
Yeah.
And your research is such that this is what you found. Now, people may not like that, but on some level, this is kind of the question you asked, this is a method that you use to answer the questions, and this is what you found. If it lands, for people in ways that don't feel good, at the same time, it also gives voice to all of the people that you worked with. Yeah, haters gonna hate.
No matter what.
But but definitely the toll, again, for the graduate students, I don't know necessarily that I would be so worried about, yes, you have to finish 6, but I would say publish in grad school, get the experience, collaborate. Don't worry about the rankings of those journals. And maybe even as junior faculty, just get accustomed to this process and understanding time, what it feels like in terms of time, what it feels like in terms of your heart. It's a real thing. And factoring all of that, because all of that matters in this the process of going from writing to submission to review to resubmission to resubmission again to resubmission to finally seeing in print. Right?
Another thing I'm thinking about too in terms of publishing is that you can also do a review. A lot of journals are open to graduate students turning in reviews. Alon is, Jazz always looks out for
recruit them. We're looking for stuff, guys.
Because this is the space usually in friendly journals like that. A space is reserved for graduate students because we want to nurture them, right? So you can do that. You can offer yourself. If you think nobody's contacting you, you can contact the reviews editor actually and ask them, hey, I've read this book, or is there a space for me to review a particular book, right? And so you can look at the format of a book review. It's a shorter piece. You are credited. You can put it on your CV, definitely. So you can do that.
Good experience.
In terms
use it if you want to, right?
Yeah.
To amplify the work of our people.
Exactly.
Because when reviews of our scholars get out there, it then, invites more people to start looking at that particular text. So that's a way of thinking about how to support the field.
Absolutely.
When we do this kind of work for each other.
As an editor, actually, I prefer usually graduate students doing the reviews because they have very fresh takes on the new things, right? And so their perspectives are really amazing and important and critical to the field. And again, these are like emerging voices that we try to support in many journals like this. So yeah, volunteer to do a review. I mean, all of these are unpaid anyway, right? And so yeah, if you email me if you're interested in reviewing, or our reviews editor, Tony Tiangson. Another thing about getting bad reviews as an editor, my practice, and this is not the practice of everybody anyway, but as an editor, I usually screen the reviews before showing them to the submitters, because I don't want harsh reviews, right? And it's kind of getting rarer and rarer, at least in the fields that I'm engaged in. It's like there's no name calling, there's no below the belt, there's no complete rejection actually, and there's no people who yell, right, in terms of words. And so usually they're very good at constructive criticisms and constructive suggestions. And so there's a specific format for doing a review. It's not your usual, qualifying paper, obviously, right? And so take a look at what's been out there, especially in the journal that you want to review for. Take a look at how they do reviews. And it doesn't have to be just books. You can review an audio, whatever, a file, a video, a film, a curated exhibit. You can review all kinds of different things, yeah, especially in interdisciplinary journals like Alan.
I happened to be able to work with an editor who gave me constructive criticism, but they were really encouraging.
Nice.
And I wasn't prepared for that, but it was really nice because it just gave me the confidence to know that I had gotten my foot in the door and somebody read my work and didn't think that it was terrible.
Yeah.
And it was just fun because I got to write about a book I was really interested in. And I got to write an opinionated review where if there were criticism, it's really just my opinion of something describing what's happening in the book, and not so much my brain being picked apart quite yet. So it feels like low stakes, but in terms of its value of what it taught me about how to write and interact with reviewers, it's been really invaluable in that way. And it's very near and dear to my heart because I got to do something that I would have journaled about anyway for fun in a place that already existed for it. So that was really encouraging. So.
And you added it to your CV?
I will when it comes out this spring. Yeah. Right now it says forthcoming, but yeah, it's just been a really encouraging process because a lot of my peers are doing something similar. And it's we get to read each other's work in the process of it. Nice. And yeah, it's just very, very much a confidence boost in that way.
You're right. It's also, it's good to have supportive people around you, especially people you don't need to explain to about the nature of your work. I tried that with my mom and it didn't work. My mom said, just type it down. Just sit down and type it. If you can't finish your dissertation, just sit down and type it up, And it's Mom, it's not that easy. But at least, have people around you who understand the nature of our work. I know parents read our work. Yeah, I told my parents to read my work, and they just looked at me afterwards.
Is it okay if I just add another tip?
Absolutely, yes. Go for it.
So one thing my mentor advised me was, so you have a draft of your article. One thing to look for is journals love it when you refer to them because it increases their, citation count, whatever. So that was kind of a way I could figure out, this is a good fit for me because I cited this journal 6 times in this article. So they, you know what I mean? It's okay, this is obviously a good fit because I'm literally citing the journal.
Yeah.
So that was a really good tip my mentor gave me.
Yeah. Be mindful about the number of times you cite though. Some editors are curious, right? It's why are they citing, 20 times, in our journal, right? So yeah. I mean, I'm sure you know the right quantity, right? So or else it will appear like you're just
sucking out
that, or you're putting them in a spot in which they'll find it hard to say no, right? Because you're citing a lot from the things that they have edited, right? And so, yeah. I know there are many different strategies and stuff, but definitely editors dislike it when you don't locate your work within the field. Sometimes it's like insulting because it's like, well, there are other people who have written about Carlos Bulosan. How come you're not citing them, Or like, you have to engage them. They're part of the field, You may not like their scholarship, but at least mention them. We encounter a lot of that in ethnic studies type essay submissions from people who are kind of outside of ethnic studies and suddenly venturing into ethnic studies thinking that they've discovered this new author named Carlos Bulosan. And it's like, no, there is a long history of people writing about this man, and so it's kind of obvious, right? When they submit essays as if they've discovered something new, right? So we just tell them you have to engage with the people in the field. I'm a full professor. I still get rejected once a month. I apply for grants or some essays that I turn in. Yeah, I don't mean to say that I'm like, immune to these kinds of things. I still, it's an emotional process, right? Because it's your work and it's being judged by somebody else that you don't know, right? And so, yeah, I feel like I give myself time, though. I tell myself, you know what, it's okay to cry, but you have to get out of bed, 3 days from now, you have to get out of bed. You cannot stay there. Yeah, it's like your little baby, and it's like they're judging it, and yeah, and it's hard. It's like academia can be so vicious, right? And so we want to encourage more and more people from our communities to join us, right? So that it gets to be more humane and communal, right? And so thank you for joining us, Angel. Thank you for helping in this event.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I couldn't come at the beginning. I was teaching my section. I was like, I'll come right after.
Work comes first, obviously. Yes. You know what? The other thing that I want to share with you too is that there are other aspects of academic publishing that you might want to engage in besides writing. I'm thinking of what Angel does for Alon. Angel is our layout specialist. Right? There's an editorial assistant who I have, who is Edward Nadurata. He's a graduate student. You can be in that role too. It's a lot of administrative shepherding of essays. But I used to be an assistant editor myself, and I learned a lot. I use all of that experience and knowledge as an editor myself right now. There's like editorials and art stuff you can do in journals. We have a forum in Alon, which is reserved for not exactly academic writing, but like opinion pieces. You can submit to that as well, right? And so there are many journals these days are multifaceted, They're not just these snobby kind of, we just do essays kind of journals. I mean, journals now do online stuff. They do audio files, video files, right? There's a lot of movement and there's a lot of creativity going on in the world of academic journal publishing. And so consider those things as well, because they're also fun, I think. Poetry, that's another one. And film submissions too. Some journals encourage that as well, like short documentaries and stuff like that, right? Okay, so should we head out? Okay, all right. Well, thank you for coming. Hope this was productive and positive for you. I'll see you all. Don't forget Alon if you want. Thank you. I had a good time. Take care, everyone.